What do you think is happening, and what do you think? How should marketers think about product marketing and repositioning product marketing in the boardroom or in the leadership today?
But there are two or three things that I think we need to continuously do to stay relevant. One is we need to shift to outcomes. Sometimes we get carried away by the things that, oh, I have written such a beautiful white paper. Oh, I have created this wonderful video. So what? Who's seeing it? What is the impact? What is the message? How is it kind of helping you reinforce the narrative that you want to build? So, what's the outcome? I think is something that we have to keep our eye on. We've been exploring some agentic AI use, and it help us automate the process of getting account specific insights from various sources. It could be your CRM, it could be your sources like Zoom Info, for instance. It could be LinkedIn, or it could be secondary web research. How can it marry all that and give me a view of the account, then create personalized messaging, then help me build personalized landing pages, and then create campaigns targeted at that account.
And that brand experience is, though marketing as a team or a function sort of communicates or creates that kind of a narrative and sets that expectation, but the delivery of that is very cross-functional. It also immediately ties back to your product team, your engineering team, your delivery team, your customer support team, all of that, even sales team. How does a marketing leader should work cross-functionally to create that experience?
Sometimes you want to look at a profile and you want to make sure that it ticks all the boxes. Somebody has experience in this area, that area, and so on. I think if a person has learning agility, if a person has the right attitude, and obviously transferable skills, right, those are critical. So if you have problem solving ability, if you have critical thinking, if you have relationship building, so if you have those communication, so if you have those 4 or 5 fundamental skills, then it's not as difficult to build a functional skill.
Welcome to the Marketing Couch, where we dive into the real challenges our B2B marketers face every day. You know that crushing feeling when sales blames you for terrible leads, product ignores everything you say about positioning, but somehow you are supposed to create this magical customer experience that makes everyone happy, isn't it? Here is the worst part: 95% of your customers aren't even buying right now, but your boss is breathing down your neck asking, where are this quarter's leads? Well, today I'm sitting down with someone who's been solving these exact problems for 20 years. Meet Anshul Kaushesh. She is the CMO of Ness Digital Engineering. And before that, she built marketing engines that actually work at companies like IBM, Dell, and Tata Communications. In the next hour, she is going to break down her simple framework for getting your CEOs to see marketing as a strategic function and not tactical. Her step by step playbook for fixing those broken relationships with sales and product teams, and her secret to hitting quarterly numbers while building long term market dominance. We are diving into ABM strategies that actually work, how to position product marketing as a revenue driver instead of just a collateral factory, and why she thinks brand building and demand generation aren't separate buckets. They're the same thing. And if you stick around till the end, Anshul shares some really cool AI tricks she's using right now that can make your marketing work way easier. So hit the subscribe button because this is going to be good. With that, I bring you Anshul Kaushesh. Hey Anshul, good to see you. Welcome to the Marketing Couch.
Thank you so much, Jaydeep, and thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
The pleasure is mine, Anshul. It has been long coming. I think we have been doing a back and forth, and
Yes.
I'm glad finally we are here and I'm able to do this with you. So thank you very much again for coming to the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So, Anshul, let's get started right away. I wanted to start with, you have spent close to 2 decades touching various functions of B2B marketing. What has changed in your view in B2B marketing during the last decade, and what probably hasn't?
Yeah, this question reminds me of my age. So just makes me feel very old.
That makes
But
two of us.
yes, but I think what I studied about marketing in B school, that has changed dramatically. Marketing does not look anything like what it used to be 15, 20 years ago. And I think the three things which I have seen drive this fundamental shift in the way we do marketing. One, I think, and this is a very abused word, but at the risk of using an overused word, I can't but I think digital transformation. Digital transformation impacting not just the businesses, but also the function of marketing. I think that has fundamentally changed in the way the customers look for information, the customers buy product, and hence, of course, how the way marketing needs to reach out to those customers, communicate to them, sell to them, and so on. Second is, I think, the focus on data driven decision making. And Jaideep, you and I both worked at IBM, and my first exposure to a very analytical, data driven approach to marketing was at IBM. And when
Mhm.
IBM rolled out this program of embedding data into every single piece of marketing, the entire customer journey, I was blown over because we really didn't know how you can track, measure, test every aspect of what you do in a marketing campaign end to end. So I think the way data is now informing every decision, that has fundamentally changed the nature of marketing. And third, of course, related to the first two, but it's marketing automation. The fact that you have so much technology which makes it so easy to personalize, to build very sophisticated real-time campaigns, to get feedback on almost real time, and then adjust your messaging, adjust your channels, frequency, everything based on that. I think those three things have driven fundamental shift in the way we do marketing.
Absolutely. I think digital transformation, I think the way we started, I think one of the biggest change that has come with digital transformation is the connected world, right? Be it on a mobile device or computer, be it through multiple channels and formats, whether it is email, WhatsApp, or dozen others. I think we are more connected than ever, and therefore we are learning more. I think the velocity of everything has increased. The expectation is also, I mean, if you look at just the life cycle of products today, we see that whether it is Apple, the consumer tech side, the Apples of the world, the Samsungs of the world, they're constantly sort of competition in terms of the next best thing, the next best thing. It used to be 3 years, 4 years,
Oh,
but
yeah.
today it is like every year everything is changing. So digital transformation definitely played a very, very important role. Of course, data, as you mentioned, I think has enabled us to a understand what is happening, and therefore the analytics on top of that has added us given us the added advantage to make smarter decisions at the right juncture.
In fact, Jaideep, to your earlier point about products and the product life cycle getting shorter and shorter, the one point I want to add is also in terms of differentiation, right? Earlier, you could think about sustainable differentiation that would last you over a few years. But unfortunately, now it's so easy for your competitors to drive feature function parity in a very, very short amount of time, which means that you don't really have a source of sustainable differentiation, which
True.
essentially means that marketing has to work that much harder to drive that shift in narrative, to find how can we change our positioning slightly, what can we do to again make sure that competitors are seeing your offerings as slightly different from the competition.
Yeah, and absolutely, it is so important. And I mean, one of the way I look at this is that as long as there is so much of noise on the feature side, and the more the noise is getting louder, I think the more it is
Yeah,
important to build a brand, a story that one can personally connect outside the features and functionalities, right? um,
absolutely.
Probably that is why marketing role is becoming even more critical, like you said, to connect with their consumers or customers, whichever domain you are, to build a sustainable brand, right?
Yes.
And what hasn't changed?
Again, very good question. I believe that fundamentals don't change, right? Having a good marketing strategy. So, just as you said, the need for building a brand which is rooted in purpose, which is rooted in understanding of the customer needs at a visceral level, not at a very superficial level. So, that focus on having the right target audience, understanding their needs, building products and propositions that speak to their needs, and then reaching out in a way that resonates with them through the channels that work for them. I think that fundamental focus and strategy hasn't changed. Unfortunately, I'm sure Jaideep, you also might be seeing it sometimes in a rush to drive short term results. We forget to focus on the fundamentals. We forget to build that strategy. So I think that critical piece to me would never change. And then I think the other thing that hasn't changed right from the beginning of our careers is the focus on ROI. So
Yeah.
even 20 years back, you spend $1 on
Yeah.
marketing, you want to see the results it drives. And I think the focus has become even more right now,
Yeah.
especially in the context. Last 2 years have been, there's a lot of volatility in terms of market, and obviously that gets reflected in the way marketing budgets are allocated and
Mm.
how marketing effectiveness is measured. So the focus
Mm.
on ROI, I don't think is again going away anytime soon.
Very important point. I think it's a good reminder to all marketers that this is one of the fundamentals. Sometimes we tend to forget, get carried away with activities, tactics, without really keeping the ROI piece in mind. While increasingly there is, and with proliferation of AI across everything, that is something that is going to be more and more in front of us now when we think of marketing holistically. So this is a good segue to my next question, which is therefore in 2025, what do you think are the top three, four agenda in any CMO's table today?
So, one, as we discussed, right, since the focus on ROI is extremely, extremely high, demand generation, obviously, as a focus area, doesn't go away. But going back to the earlier discussion that we were having, Jaydeep, I think, in spite of the short term focus on demand generation, which obviously absolutely is critical, and if you need to justify the role of the marketing function, you can't take your eyes off that. But I think you also cannot afford to shift your eyes off the long term goal of brand building. So, brand building, how do you build a brand that cuts through the noise that is there today? In fact, I will probably share a conversation that I was having with one of the influencers in the industry, and we were talking about how there is so much content today. And
Mhm.
with Gen AI coming in, obviously the content creation process has become so easy that this plethora of content flooding the market. And already we are competing for very scarce attention. So,
Yeah.
with more and more content being generated, how do we get attention?
Yeah.
And the perspective that he shared was very different, and I hadn't thought of it that way. He said, now you're creating content not for humans, but you are creating content for agents. So, I think that is a shift that we haven't yet fully understood, and we haven't figured out how it will impact the marketing function. So that,
Hmm.
I think, will be the second piece that marketers will have to start thinking about. So what's the impact of AI, not just in the way you are optimizing the function or you are increasing, you using different tools across your marketing execution, but also what impact it has on your marketing strategy. So, how you communicate to the customers. I think that is a very important shift that we have to start thinking about actively now.
Yeah, I think this is again such an important piece of nugget. In fact, I learned it very recently when I was doing my own research on creating content that you now create content also keeping algorithm of that particular platform in mind.
Yeah.
And because each platform works differently and they are at any given point of time promoting or focusing on a style of format, certain style of content, and you need to know this as a content creator, which is, I would say, in this case, even as a marketer, for you to leverage, optimize and leverage these platforms to their best advantage, right? um,
Yes.
I think absolutely yes. So Anshul, let me just go back to the, probably I should have started with that. So you recently joined Ness as their head of global marketing. Congratulations for your new role.
Thank you. Thank you.
Talk about it a little bit. What does Ness do, and what's your role there, and probably what are your key charter here?
Yeah. So, Jaydeep, it's been about over a month since I joined Ness. Ness is a digital engineering company. Basically, it means that we do product engineering across. So, we are very focused on a few verticals. So, we work with financial services, we work with the technology, media, telecom, manufacturing, and transportation, commercial, which essentially includes retail, healthcare, and others. So we have capabilities across the entire product development life cycle. So right from product strategy to design to product engineering to sustenance engineering is what we do. And then marrying it with the data and AI capabilities, I think the proposition that we have is fairly strong. So Ness has been in this business for over 20 years.
Mhm.
It's headquartered in New York. It has presence in US, Mexico, Europe, Eastern Europe, and India. So we have 4,000 people spread across all these locations. In terms of my role, I head the marketing function, and all the things that we've been talking about, I think those are part of my charter. So, how do we build the brand? So, Ness is a niche player and it's very well known and respected in those circles. So, how do we reinforce, sharpen that brand positioning, and how do we reinforce that brand equity is the first priority. And the second, of course, as we've talked about, right, demand generation.
Right.
We have a fairly targeted approach. We have a certain set of accounts that we want to grow deeper into. So,
Mm.
how do we look at key stakeholders, build engaging, long lasting relationships, and then
Mm.
hence drive revenue is the second part.
Excellent. So I think knowing a little bit about your background with working with large and strategic accounts, and I think it is playing on your strength, I guess. So that
Thank you.
really is great. Awesome. So one of the areas I talk to often with leaders is that, and I get to also hear. I recently spoke to a sales leader from a large telecom company, and he mentioned that he has seen the best of marketing and he has seen the worst of marketing.
Yeah.
And he has very sort of strong ground when he said that. And one of the challenges that we see is that marketing sometimes tend to get in silos and tend to work and run things in silos, creating our own agenda, and also sort of getting carried away with what's in, and we need to
Hmm.
just jump into that new trend and try and experiment something and all of that, right? In the process, one of the major important aspect that marketing owns, both as a owner and also sometimes as a marketing also is kind of steward the brand, is that the experience, right, that sort of is
Hmm.
promised to the customer. And that brand experience is, though marketing as a team or a function sort of communicates or creates that kind of a narrative and sets that expectation, but the delivery of that is very cross functional. It also immediately ties back to your product team, your engineering team, your delivery team, your customer support team, all of that, even sales team. So how does a marketing leader should work cross functionally to create that experience? Because that's easier said than done, and it's a kind of challenge that we all know, which is very hard to solve. In your experience, did you see challenges like this, and how did you actually solve such challenge to bring everybody aligned to that same narrative, and then committing on delivering that experience, right, to the customer?
Jaydeep, you're absolutely right. I think cross functional alignment is critical, but it is also the hardest part of marketing, any marketing role, whether it's product marketing, whether it's a CMO role, whether it's an account based marketing role, because you don't do anything in isolation. So, not even strategy. And your strategy, if it's created in isolation, it's bound to fail. Principles I follow, rules of thumb. One is that get the stakeholders involved right at the beginning. So, like you said, right, sometimes we get very attracted by a flashy new thing and we want to experimentation is good, which you can do on the side. But when you want to scale something, when you want to execute something at the organizational level, then I think it's important to get the buy in of the key stakeholders right in the beginning and not go to them once you have baked the cake, more or less. Second is everybody has conflicting priorities.
Mhm.
So sometimes you need to appreciate the goals that the other stakeholders are working towards, and you may need to pivot your own goals, objectives, plans to align, keeping the short term and the long term organizational priorities in mind. And usually, I have realized that if you finally circle back to what is the business objective, then everybody can see that what is the most reasonable or what's the best compromise to work towards that. So if you have to kind of keep your eye on the business, ultimate business goal. And I think third is we also have to be open to feedback. Sometimes we might believe that this is the best way to do marketing, and again, there's so much going on in our function. It's very exciting. There are lots of new things to do, new things to try. It's also marketing is also a very creative function. So sometimes you have really good ideas, But unless you can show impact, and sometimes people have feedback, and actually not sometimes, most of the times, almost everybody has an opinion on, right from a small thing as to how you do a campaign to a strategic decision, how you want to name and position a product. Everybody would have opinion. But I think being open to that feedback and then sifting through that feedback to identify what is important, what would have an impact on the way you are building your strategy plan and then execution, and incorporating that in your strategy, I think is also critical.
I really like the idea that you said taking your cross functional peers, organizational leadership along with you rather than somewhere midway or already baked, showing them a surprise. Nobody likes surprise, right? Unless
Yeah.
otherwise, then once in a blue moon, really. So, the other, I think, rescue point, as you mentioned earlier, was data, right? So, if you were to prove a point, or if you were to really get everybody on board on a specific mission or a project, or convince maybe on an idea, I think nothing works better than a powerful set of data and insights. Either when you're beginning, maybe banking on more on the market data, the market intelligence kind of information. But if it is somewhere in the mid and you have launched an initiative, then actually showing the real data. And I think people understand, right? I mean, we have seen that people understand when you tell, even if it is a bad news, but showing them with the data, and maybe the reasons that you mentioned are actually backed by hardcore insights and data, people get it. Second thing
True.
is feedback, right? I mean, I think it is such an important thing. I think, again, openness is very important, empathy is very important. You mentioned that people may have conflicting priorities, so even that is very important. Just bulldozing your way doesn't work anymore, keeping the organizational sort of interest in mind. And then I think another thing that I've noticed is that your top boss, maybe the CEO, need to champion this, because if that individual is not completely in sync, then there's going to be probably problems all the way. And if you're a public company, maybe even your board and everything, everyone, right, in that, the key stakeholders. But all these three are very, very important point. Yeah, please go ahead.
No, so I think, Jaydeep, the third point that you mentioned, the executive sponsorship, that I think is so critical, because I truly believe that marketing is strategy. Right? The two cannot be divorced. And having the CEO and the board aligned with that is so important. If marketing doesn't have a seat at the table, then marketing becomes only a tactical event execution, program execution kind of function.
Absolutely, absolutely. You only are seen when brand launches need to be done, announcement
Correct.
needs to be done, right? Or events need to be. So absolutely true. And I think this was in line with the conversation I was having with the sales leaders as well. One of the important thing is, is to continue on the customer side, reinstate the value delivery part. Right. I think often we drop the ball or thinking that, yeah, customers know because we've already delivered the project, right?
Mhm.
But I think marketing, as we have known fundamentally, is all about multitude of impressions, reinstating, restating the same thing again and again through different way or through different sort of format and stories. But keep telling that, because like advertising, it doesn't register our head in just one or two
Yeah.
impressions. It's all about a number of impressions. Sometimes you remember a bad advertising for a long period. It's just because, and the
True.
brand still benefits because, maybe no
Mhm.
matter how lousy the ad may be, you probably will see that there is a direct sort of connection to the sales there, right? So, like sometimes they say any publicity is good. So,
True.
so I wanted to go back to an important point you just mentioned some time back, which is there is a lot of scrutiny and there is a lot of focus on ROI, right? And you have spent last close to almost 5 years, and we'll talk about it. I think your career journey itself is very interesting, so we'll get to that. But I don't want to sort of steal the thunder there. But essentially, I want to touch upon one aspect of the product marketing, because you led a global product marketing function prior to Ness in Tata Communications. And in that role, you might have had a good line of sights and also a very good understanding of how product marketing can really impact organizations, right? In the last 12 to 16 months or 18 months, I have come across multiple such coverages and stories and actual real instances where product marketing has been subject to the ROI discussion. And one of the reason for that is basically product marketing marketers are kind of seen that as more of collateral developers, or product launches or maybe creating certain collaterals and so on. While we know product marketing fundamentally actually is such a powerful function that helps not just enable your growth but also creates a differentiation through right positioning, messaging, and value proposition, and also is a great leverage for building the traction on the commercial side as well. And they also sort of are responsible for stating the right GTM for any specific product or service. What do you think is happening, and what do you think, how should marketers think about product marketing and repositioning product marketing in the boardroom or in the leadership today?
So, Jaideep, I think my stint at Tata Communications was incredibly fulfilling because product marketing as a function was central to everything that we were doing. It was central to strategy. One of the biggest things that we did was actually drove a change in the way company was positioned. So the company was primarily seen as a network services provider, but then it had built significant capabilities in cloud, security, IoT, customer experience over a period of time. So, how do we bring different portfolios together, make a narrative which is coherent and resonates well with the customers? So, we worked with the CEO and the senior leadership team to kind of put the pieces together and then drive that consistent articulation across the organization. And I'm so proud of that work because that narrative then became the foundational um, foundational fuel for the strategy. So the strategy started becoming informed by that narrative. Essentially, to just delve into it a little bit, what we said was that the infrastructure that most IT infrastructure that most organizations have is in silos, and it's very difficult for them to get a unified view. So, how do you build that orchestration layer that helps you get visibility of that infrastructure and then manage that infrastructure seamlessly? And we called that orchestration layer the digital fabric. And then once we started using that narrative, the organization also started investing in building the capabilities that brought this orchestration layer to life. So that's the impact that product marketing can have. But there are two or three things that I think we need to continuously do to stay relevant. One is we need to shift to outcomes.
Right.
Sometimes we get, again, going back to the earlier point we made, right, we get carried away by the things that, oh, I have written such a beautiful white paper, oh, I have created this wonderful video, so what, who's seeing it, what is the impact, what is the message, how is it kind of helping you reinforce the narrative that you want to build? So what's the outcome, I think, is something that we have to keep our eye on. Second is, how can you become the voice of the customer? And that, I think, is probably the most important role that product marketing team can play. So you're not collateral creators, you are somebody who is listening to the customers, who's understanding that feedback and then feeding it back to the product team. And only then you have that impact on strategy. And then I think third, you talked about product marketing being the linchpin of GTM strategy. In fact, in SaaS companies, you even have a product led motion that product marketeers actively drive.
PLG, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, right. I think, as long as we are able to show that impact and the outcome, as you mentioned, and relate that to maybe a pipeline, relate that to maybe account growth within an existing account, or relate that to mind share, brand share, market share in a specific area or category. I think that's about closing the loop, I guess, right? So while getting carried away with a piece of work that we have done, I think we all take pride of our good work, and which is absolutely fine and fair, but not to forget what is it for, what
yeah.
is the ultimate outcome of that, right? Because this is the business, this is not a creative industry, right? So great, and that's a good segue again to my next sort of area, which is ABM. So you have sort of done ABM in the past, and again we spoke about the importance of growing strategic accounts or focusing on strategic accounts or the strategic segment. Can you share a little bit at a high level about how you think ABM programs are effective growing within a specific segment and also growing specific set of accounts, because it's large investment work. It requires cross-functional participation in the lines of we just discussed, and it also requires your customers also to some extent participate in that. And it's always a long-term activity, right?
Yes.
It's not. Oftentimes, we start tracking of how many engagements we have done, how many meetings we have done, but it is much beyond that. So, can you share your own experience with ABM program?
So I, when I think of impact of ABM, I like going back to the ITSMA model. They talk about the three R's. They talk about reputation, talk about relationship, and then revenue. And to your point about ABM being a long term engagement, it is true because if it has to impact these three reputation, relationship, and revenue, then it has to be a long term investment. Sometimes organizations do a fairly tactical intervention. They expect immediate results. And if you don't have 20 meetings lined up in 2 weeks, then you start pivoting. I think you have to stay put because any relationship building, whether it's within organization or personal relationships, it takes a lot of investment. But with ABM, what I have also realized is that if we can figure out a way to co create with the customer,
Hmm.
that's when we have the most impact. So, accounts where you start engaging early and you're willing to work with the key stakeholders in building the solution together. So, things like discovery workshops, innovation workshops, I think, again, tactical interventions, but they're very impactful because it's not you speaking at the customer, it's you having a joint discussion about their problem and how to best solve that problem.
I
And
think I think knowing your account, your customer, and their business, I think is one of the foundational requirement when we are doing ABM, because the only way probably you can co-create is to align the values, understanding where their maybe 3 year or 5 year plan is. And I guess the tactical interventions that you mentioned are extremely critical to align some of their objectives, because sometimes they, I think, need also help from the vendor side to build that narrative internally, to get more people into that circle of influence that they are trying to create, and you kind of become a partner for them to do that job, isn't it?
that's true. And I think if we have to frame the marketing focus for any account based marketing intervention, I think of it in three areas. So one is insights. And you are absolutely right that without insights, running an ABM campaign is like stumbling blind, right? Going in completely blind. You don't know what they want, and then it's a spray and pray kind of
What
approach.
what type of insights you're referring here?
I think deep account insights, identifying who the key stakeholders are, including the buyers and the influencers, mapping those relationships, understanding who's a promoter, who may not be so positively inclined towards your company. So, understanding that nuances of existing relationships as well as the relationships that you need to build, I think insights have to be really deep. The second piece is engagement. So once you have mapped the priorities and the stakeholders and the current relationships, how do you engage? Especially, how do you engage with the parts of the organizations that you haven't spoken to before? And then, of course, third is active demand generation. So identifying opportunities and progressing them. Sometimes what happens is that you jump straight away into engagement and lead gen without really doing the homework of insights.
Insights. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think you're so right about that. And it also comes from, and that's why maturity of a marketing leader and the ability to sort of show the overall journey of how an ABM program may look like, even before jumping into any specific area, so that people at least aligned who need to participate and commit time and bandwidth to execute on the program at different touch points, right? Who are the right type of people who actually should be participating in an ABM program?
So, certainly your sales teams. If you're a services organization, then your delivery teams. If you're a product organization, then your product teams. Sometimes even the engineering teams, the customer success teams. So, I think anyone who has any interface with the customer should be a part of the ABM program because they have insights from their interactions, their vantage points that would help you build the entire picture. Just
Hmm.
a secondary research report from from a database may not help. So you have to put in the hard yards to build that 360-degree view.
And I think personalization is also very key, and that can only be done when you have not just the secondary data, but have actual intel And which is one of the reasons I think accounts where we don't have that kind of visibility or traction, it's hard to execute in those accounts. At least you need to have at least one or two promoters or well-wishers who have complete trust on to basically bring you in and introduce with the larger team, I guess.
I think Jadip, that brings two more things to mind. So one is, I think it's important to articulate the value that you have delivered to an account, especially if you're expanding in an existing account.
Right.
uh, Very often we get so caught up with the technology that we forget about the business impact that
Mm.
our project, our product would have had on the customer. I think if we can capture that, then that helps the new as well as the current stakeholders see the value the company brings. And then that helps with the credibility, that helps with the reputation in the organization. And I think second is nurture. So nurture not just when we are, so you have a lead, they don't want to buy today, okay, so you nurture them for 6 months, 8 months, 12 months. That's one part of nurture. But I think sometimes marketing disengages once you have converted an opportunity.
Mm. Mm. Yep.
I often think about what is the role of marketing post purchase.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. My
Um,
favorite topic too. Yes.
yes, and I don't think we have enough rigor, and sometimes it's just bandwidth, right?
Yeah.
Bandwidth and the pressure of
Yeah.
showing.
And what you are measured on oftentimes
Exactly,
internally, right? I
exactly.
mean, I've spoken to people because I also had an opportunity to work in the customer success side.
Hmm.
That why marketing doesn't invest that level of commitment, time, bandwidth in the post sales cycle, right? Because we know traditionally in enterprise business, your 65-70% or maybe 70 to 75% if your revenue comes from existing client base.
Yes,
And talking about ABM is just one of them. Customer advisory boards, part of some of those programs. But I have seen and spoken to leaders who are so focused in only pre-sale stage and bringing a lead to a closure at the best, right? The people forget that we are actually, as a marketer, we are responsible for creating that experience for the entire customer journey. And the customer journey, real journey, only starts once they come on board
yeah,
or once they convert as a customer. That's where rubber
true.
hits the road, right? So all of that promises that you are doing,
True.
you don't know whether
Hmm.
delivery team is doing that. You don't know if your product team is meeting customers expectations, or your customer success or support team are actually doing or speaking in a different tone, let's say, right? Just from a
Yeah.
communication standpoint. So one of the so I was speaking to the CMO of 24/7, and he said he quoted an example that there was an account that he knows where they chased 7 years to close
Wow.
through ABM program to close on that. And ultimately they closed that account, and it was 20 million a year, 5 year, $100 million contract. So that was a kind of success stories ABM has, provided it is done, I guess, with the right type of execution and lot of orchestration, I guess, right?
Yes.
That is also critical. So talking in the same line, right? Anything you mentioned that, so we know there are in demand customers, sorry, in market customers, and then there are customers who are currently not buying maybe for even the entire year, and they probably are looking at a horizon of at least 12 months to 18 months, right? The importance of nurture that you just mentioned. And as a demand generation strategy, it is important to have tapping into probably the in-market customers through demand capture system or demand capture kind of a programs. And then the generation is essentially the nurture part where the customer is not there yet to buy, and we know 5% customers are only buying at any point of time.
Hmm.
95% are actually shopping, or sort of doing window shopping or learning. I think education is a very, very important this thing. So how should marketers orchestrate programs that generate both in market customers as well as generate demand for non-active buyers at this point of time? Is there anything that you can think of in your recent experience that helps our viewers in the program?
So it's a tough one, Jaydeep. Not because you cannot orchestrate programs, primarily because the organizations, especially in the current context, the focus is on this quarter, next quarter,
Q in quarter
and
and Q plus one. Huh?
exactly. So when you are talking about customers who are not in market today, but maybe in market 12 months, 16 months later, then you cannot afford to allocate a lot of resources to those customers. And I tend to use the Pareto principle here. Again, 80% effort, time, resources on things that are going to drive results in the short term, and then 20% focused on nurture for the long term. But obviously, it is critical that you keep them warm, because when they are ready to buy, then your brand should be top of mind. I guess time tested things like having educational thought leadership content available, engaging with those customers through content, through events, through industry platforms, and so on. Just keep them warm, make sure your brand is visible, but at the same time, make sure that your time and bandwidth is appropriately allocated.
Absolutely. So the I think the both in quarter and Q plus one as well. I think that's a fine balance that marketers learn to
Yeah.
balance, because I think in some way businesses also sort of operate that way. Investments for long term as well as investment for short term. So let's switch gear, and we want to touch upon a little bit on the branding side. Ongoing debates on whether or not to build a brand specifically for the segments or the categories that you are targeting, vis-a-vis a widespread, branding for all kind of initiative. When it comes to brand building, should marketing focus on a wide net kind of approach, or prioritize the category or the segments that they are focusing on? What do you think?
So my answer here is very clear. I think you have to build brand for your customers. There is no point building a brand for a mass market if you're not selling to the mass market. It's a waste of resources. So a targeted, focused approach, where, because your positioning wouldn't even make sense to people who are not even a part of your target market. I
Okay.
think
Any
use the resources.
specific branding trends that you see that are emerging, maybe in last couple of years?
Last couple of years, branding has become a very challenging area, because I also see some people now questioning the need for building a brand,
Mhm.
because we are living in a series of short term. So, what is the role that a brand would play in the long term? But having said that, I personally am still a firm believer in building a brand. But I also believe that given the churn in the market today and the way things evolve so fast, especially in the technology industry, building a brand that aligns with a purpose probably is a more sustainable way of uh, creating something longer term.
Mm.
uh, and with Gen Z now coming into workforce, they are very focused on working for organizations that have a larger mission, that have a larger purpose, very well
Absolutely, yeah.
defined. Europe is very focused on sustainability, and sometimes we do talk about sustainability, but it shouldn't be a lip service. It has to be an integral part of your brand and the company DNA. So, what's the purpose that your company resonates with, aligns with, and then having that reflect in the brand? I think probably is the way to build a brand in the current context.
What are the right vehicles of building brands for in the enterprise marketing or B2B marketing? At least something that is more contemporary now.
I think that would depend on your target market, your objectives, and of course the resources available. I think good thought leadership doesn't go out of fashion. So,
True.
especially if you have a point of view that can cut through the clutter, and if you can give your customers something to think about, something that others haven't started talking about yet.
So thought leadership is, I think, is probably the anchor hook of any B2B marketing. And you are absolutely right. Probably it would never go out of fashion, because marketing is also largely education. And
Hmm.
I think thought leadership plays a big role playing that role. Because as we mentioned, as we discussed, when your customers are not actively buying, they're not necessarily completely out of the market. They're also coming there to learn, to understand where the market is moving, what others are doing, and what are the trends that they need to be aware, and how they can build competitive advantage, and so on. And I think thought leadership is probably the right vehicle. But thinking of thought leadership earlier, it would be like, your white papers, maybe industry point of views. For a longest period, the consulting firms thrived on that, right? The McKinseys of the world,
Hmm.
BCGs of the world, and so on. Then came the large IT companies like Accenture's, Infosys, TCS, all of that companies. What are the vehicles that today, I think video is a big way, right, in terms of delivering that thought leadership. One of the things that I personally feel now, podcast has become an important vehicle, be it in the only audio or audio or video, depending on who is your audience and how they consume content. But content obviously plays an important role. Events, I think, is also an important vehicle to bring about thought leadership, being presenting maybe a paper or a point of view or a specific keynote and all that. That's also important, but not that everyone can afford or probably
Yeah.
be there always, right? And then I think blogs never go out of fashion. They are also a cool area, cool way to sort of on a regular basis keep. It's like a drip motion where you keep feeding, and then there are newsletters. Right? I guess that also plays an important role. I'm just thinking loudly on the vehicles that brings that thought leadership, supplies that thought leadership. So in terms of investments, right? So brand building is not cheap. It's expensive. Again, it goes back to the same thing. How do you prioritize brand building investments versus demand gen uh,
Yeah.
investments?
Again, a very tough one. uh, I think it's a juggling act and
Mm,
it's constant. I think if you can somehow figure out a way to marry your building programs with lead gen programs, that's the best way to justify
mm,
investments. And
mm,
I'll give you an example. So, in my last role, we were trying to build associations with customer experience for Tata Communications. This was an area that was new to us. So, we decided that we wanted to invest in some thought leadership work with Harvard Business Review. Now, Harvard obviously gives you credibility, and we also did research that gave you some insights and some thought leadership material that could engage the customers. But at the same time, if you market these thought leadership assets well, you can generate leads. So we spent a lot of money, but apart from things like impressions and downloads and so on, we also got a lot of leads out of that. So I
sure.
think that's one good way to marry the two.
Hmm.
The other thing I think is, especially in the services industry, your differentiator is your people.
Mm,
Can you use your people to build your brand? And especially when you have really, really smart people working on some very cool, cutting edge stuff, then if they can be your spokespeople for the brand, then they are not just building the brand, but they're also building relationships with customers and prospects, and they can eventually help you drive pipeline as well.
yeah, yeah, no, so true. I was reading the other day an interesting article where it says that marketers should be able to explain to people that actually brand building and demand generations are not separate. If there is no brand, there is actually no demand.
Right.
I mean, who would go and buy an unlabeled packet from a shelf?
Hmm.
Similarly, who will buy a product and service which is mission critical for them and their customers, sourcing from a vendor whom they never heard of or have not seen anywhere? So therefore, building a brand is kind of, I think, the most essential first step of demand gen, right? So I think we need to just tell this more effectively in our among our executive leadership team and probably even in the boardroom, so that people don't look at that through different lenses. Absolutely right. So let's switch gear, and I want to talk about AI a little bit, because without AI there is no conversation in
Yes.
marketing today. So tell me about what is the kind of martech stack that you have and you prefer to have, and where what AI plays a role on that today.
So, Jaideep, we are experimenting with AI, I think, just like
Everyone else.
most of the organizations today.
Right.
I see a lot of use cases. I think obviously the low hanging fruit is content creation, which everybody is doing it. I don't think any marketer is writing the first draft on their own today. It's all
Absolutely.
all
Absolutely. Yeah.
Gen AI. But I also see some interesting use cases in ABM, for instance. So
Hmm.
we've been exploring some agentic AI use
Wow.
applications for ABM. So how
Hmm.
can it help us automate the process of getting account specific insights from various sources? So
Hmm.
it could be your CRM, it could be your sources like Zoom Info, for instance. It could be LinkedIn, or it could be secondary web research. How can it marry all that and give me a view of the account, then create personalized messaging, then help me build personalized landing pages, and then create campaigns targeted at that account.
Hmm.
Again, very, very early stages. We are
Sure.
exploring this use case. If we are able to get a POC up and running, then I'll keep you posted on how that
Fantastic.
goes.
I would love to know that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
So, in terms of overall marketing stack, right, is just one piece of it. There are there are marketing automation, there are analytics, there are social listening, there are hundreds of other things, and
Yes,
and one of the challenges I see today, marketers, especially the new ones and the younger ones, sort of get carried away, and to them, this entire tools is what makes up marketing in many cases, right? So, do you see that similar kind of thing? Like there's too much of talk about tools and platforms in marketing, especially in the younger generation.
it is. I think sometimes, yes, you're right. Sometimes we do get carried away by technology. I read somewhere that working with any of the Gen AI tools and platforms is like working with an agency. So the quality of output will be only as good as the quality of input. So if you don't have a really good brief for
Hmm.
your agency,
Hmm.
the outcome that you would get would not meet expectations. Similarly, if you don't have a really good prompt, so if you don't, many people would talk about how content from Gen AI tools, ChatGPT or whatever else, is very generic. It is generic because it's not informed by your differentiated point of view.
True.
So the point of view has to be yours. The
Hmm.
writing, the polishing, the editing can be
Hmm.
the tool. So I think
Absolutely.
marrying the tools, honestly, I'm incredibly excited about the potential of these tools because uh, they are life changing on the way they help you increase efficiency, productivity, and so on. But at the same time, they cannot replace the human judgment, the human understanding, and the human oversight. So you have to
Hmm.
be able to marry the two.
Yeah, like they say that for AI at least, context is everything.
Hmm.
So the better context is equal to better outcome. So absolutely true. So Anshul, so wanted to relate to that. What kind of team structure you have? I mean, what are the different composition of people or functions you have?
So I think it's very similar to most organizations. So we have a digital function, which is essentially website, social, digital channels. We have a market insights function. We have analyst relations. That's a critical part of marketing that actually we haven't
Absolutely.
really talked
Yeah, we
about.
haven't spoken. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Then we
I would
have,
like to, anyway, I mean, talk about it a little bit because I think it's a very critical function. I think I've missed that part. Yeah, I mean, what do you think is analyst relation where we are today, and what role it plays for the larger audience here who are listening to this um, in brand building as well as in demand chain?
yeah, I think it kind of sits between awareness and demand gen, and it plays into building the credibility.
Mm,
So once you're a part of the long list, then
mm,
you need to have some credentials, some
mm,
endorsement to say that
mm,
you're actually good at doing that.
mm.
So I think having an endorsement by different analyst firms is important. Obviously, you have to be careful about which areas, which analyst firms, which reports, and so on. But it's important to build that relationship because a lot of analysts also work in advisory capacity when they are talking to their enterprise clients, and they have opportunity to introduce you, to recommend you in a lot of situations.
Sure. So analyst relations, what else?
So I'm
So you
thinking,
said
what did I cover?
digital. Yeah, you
Yes.
said digital. Then you said,
uh, Digital. So let me start from the beginning. So
sure.
we have digital, then we have analyst relations, then market
Hmm.
insights, then external communications, so PR, media engagement, and so on. Then content, ABM, and inside sales.
What would be
Inside
those?
sales is,
Sorry, go ahead.
sorry, it's more like a lead development kind of function. Yeah.
Understood. Understood.
Yeah.
So more like an SDR kind of thing, is it?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So what are those maybe top two, three fundamentals that you see when you are hiring people in your team?
So I
Besides, of course, the job description part, which I'm.
correct. I'm a big believer in hiring for the right potential and the right aptitude.
Wow.
So
Correct.
sometimes you want to look at a profile and you want to make sure that it ticks all the boxes. Somebody has experience in this area, that area, and so on. I think if a person has learning agility, if a person has the right attitude, and obviously transferable skills, right? Those are
Hmm.
critical. So
Hmm.
if you have problem solving ability, if you have critical thinking, if you have relationship building. So if you have those communication, so if you have those 4 or 5 fundamental skills, then it's not as difficult to build a functional skill. So for instance, in the past, I have hired people in product marketing who didn't have product marketing experience, and
Hmm.
honestly, those people have been top performers on my team. So you also have to kind of take a bit of a gamble on
True. Yeah,
people
it's
sometimes.
always
Yeah,
some part of it is your gut.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So,
Mm.
today's distributed work environment and hybrid work policies, as a leader, one of your other challenges, of course, the team to keep the team aligned, focused, and motivated, right? Um,
Correct.
anything that you do in particular to sort of, obviously your new team is still very new team, but in general,
Mhm.
right? In your last company, that anything that you think that you did differently, or at least something that you practice that you feel have worked well for you, considering you might have passed that
Mm.
entire COVID time, right?
Yes, yes. So actually, I joined Tata Communications during COVID.
COVID.
So the first couple of years were completely virtual.
Hmm.
I think few, again, going back to the fundamentals, Teddy, having clarity about what you are trying to achieve together is non-negotiable. So you have the short-term goals clearly laid out, but you should also have the long-term vision, and then you need to help the team appreciate how the two are related. So
Hmm.
having that strategic clarity, I think, becomes the foundation of a good team.
Hmm.
Second is, I personally am a kind of person who really values autonomy. And I try to make sure that my team has the same. So you have
Hmm.
autonomy, you have ownership, and of course you it comes with accountability.
Accountability, yes.
Yes.
Hmm.
So, and then third is transparency. And especially
Hmm.
it's critical in virtual environments because you're not talking to each other regularly, you're not having water cooler conversations.
Correct.
Um, and when you get on a Teams call, the agenda is very clearly defined. You're not, uh, you're sometimes not aware of what's going on, in the background. So making sure that you are transparent from your end and you encourage the transparency across the team is critical as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, interesting. And I think I truly value in some of those areas autonomy. For example, if I would like to have the same thing, I would like my team also to have the same thing, right?
Hmm.
Transparency, for example, I think that's also so important. Accountability, obviously, is not something will come without the sense of autonomy, right? When I know I have the leverage, I have the freedom to do what I want and the way I want, I'm also responsible for delivering the outcome.
Yes.
So, absolutely right. So, let's switch back to now. One of the interesting areas that definitely is part of this conversation is your own career. I think you started after post MBA. So, you went to IIM Koriko, right?
That's right.
For your MBA, right? So, right after that, I think you started with academia. Is that correct?
Actually, I started with banking.
You started with banking, yes.
I
Yeah.
found it incredibly boring, not my cup of tea. Yeah.
Okay, right. In fact, one of my niece recently joined banking right after engineering and got bored in 2 months and left. But just reminded
Yeah.
me that. And then you joined academia, and
That's
you
right.
spent close to 5 years in academia, which is very interesting, right? And
Yes.
then you decided to move to corporate world, which is relatively uncommon, but I mean, it's not very common for sure, right? So, what
Mhm.
triggered you to make that move during that academic period, and why choose academia after MBA?
So, uh, Jaideep, honestly, I wish I could say that my career was a result of some grand plan. They say hindsight is 2020, so I'm trying to make sense of things that have happened over the last 20 years uh,
Hmm.
to build this narrative. But essentially, if you so I moved to academics because at that point of time, honestly, I wanted to do something that was a little more um, analytical in nature. I like writing, and this is,
Hmm.
what, 24 years back. So
Hmm.
without writing, without chat GPT,
Hmm.
I like doing research. So when you are in B school, you're immersed in that academic environment, and I wanted to continue that motion.
Hmm.
So when I got this opportunity to do research, to teach, to work on publishing a few things, I thought I, it was the right opportunity at the right time.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then 5 years later, there
And you
was
published quite a few books, academic books, right? I mean,
I edited and compiled quite a few
compiled,
books.
right, right, right.
Yes,
You
yes.
didn't think of PhD at that time?
Actually, I did. So
Okay.
again, at 5 years, the choice was Either I go deeper into academics and do a
Mm.
PhD, or I look at a corporate career path. And then
Mm.
I think the driving factor for me was I have gone quite deep into brand strategy, marketing strategy, customer behavior, and so on. But I wanted to see how it gets applied in the real world. And
Mm.
at that point of time, the view was that I will go back to academics. It hasn't happened in the last 20 years. Maybe someday it will. But the intent was to see the real world business and marketing problems
Mm.
and see how some of what I have learned and taught can be applied to that.
Yeah. So you have, in a way, continuously reinvented yourself, and that could be in different segments or industries or even different marketing functions to reach to where you are. Do you think looking back, it helped you, giving yourself exposed to different industries and also all kind of different businesses rather than sticking to one specific type?
Oh, yes, I personally I have grown a lot, and all these new experiences, right? So whether it's a new company, a new industry, a new role, or even a new geography, I think they have added tremendously to my worldview. It's not just professional growth, it's also personal growth, because you are also shaped by the kind of people that you meet, that you work with. I think being open to new experiences, sometimes also jumping in into unknown, has shaped me as a person and has
Mm.
been tremendously helpful for my career.
Any specific learning? I mean, let's say if you were to go back all over to 22, how would you do things differently if at all you would do?
Um,
Or what would be your
a
advice
diff-
to your 22-year self?
I think, okay, let me think about this one. I think we live in an era of instant gratification. And sometimes
Mm.
I see this with my daughter, I see this with my teams as well,
Mm.
where you're in a hurry to get somewhere. And maybe when I was in my 20s, I had the same thing. Okay, what's
Mm.
next? I'm bored
Mm.
now. What's
Mm.
next? So, what I would tell my 22-year-old self is that don't rush the journey. Sometimes the point of the journey is the journey. So,
Mm. Yeah,
so
yeah, very
don't
true.
always think about the next step.
Yeah, yeah. You lose out what is happening in the present,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any Are there any books or podcasts or resources that you sort of consume or leverage to keep yourself updated, not just in marketing, maybe broad business areas?
So in marketing, of course, some of the regular blogs, like I think HubSpot blog is a good
Hmm.
source of
Inbound marketing,
tactical,
right? Yeah.
yeah, advice that you have. In terms of books, honestly, not so much marketing books,
Hmm.
but for instance, I like books that kind of marry. I like neuroscience and psychology. So
Okay.
one of the books that has been very important for me is Influence by Robert Cialdini.
Mm-hmm.
I think that talks about fundamental principles of persuasion. So, reciprocity, social proof. And I think all those principles are applicable not just in our life,
Yep.
but also in marketing. So, I think that's actually a very good marketing book, even though it's not a marketing book. Then I think books like, for instance, Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. That's also a very interesting book because it helps you figure out how do you sharpen your articulation, how do you identify that hook that
Mm.
uh, you can use in your messaging, and
Mm.
so on.
Mm.
Recently I was reading this book called Loon Shots, which talks about all these people across history who have taken absolutely wild gambles and nobody really believed in them at that point of time, and they've gone on to do wonderful things.
Mm.
But then that talks about how organizations can create a structure that helps these wild ideas uh,
Mm.
thrive and
Mm.
scale.
Mm.
So uh, different books, different areas. So I actually, Jaydeep, I read anything and everything.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think self-development is a personal
Hmm.
accountability, and I don't think any organizations, or for that matter, even parents or your family can push you, right?
Yeah.
It's a completely inner journey, inner drive to become a better version in whichever way you want to pursue, right? And I wonder that the current generation, like your daughter, I also have a college going son. He doesn't read much books, and I wondered that where will they actually get some of these nuggets, some of these nuances that are actually explained in long form in books. You can of course watch lots of videos, it helps, but retention of videos are increasingly getting poorer. right? Because there are
Yeah.
so many, and books kind of slows you down. It forces you to slow you down, and therefore the internalization perhaps is much better of any specific concept or idea that you're reading, and your retention is much higher. So I wondered that what will happen to this generation and next, because they're so glued to now and here, and everything is fast and speed, right?
That's actually my one of my biggest fears with Gen AI is that it will. So when we started using computers and phones and so on, so we got out of the habit of writing. So now people don't bother to learn spelling or
Mm,
grammar, for instance, right?
true.
Now with Gen AI, again, writing as a skill, communicating as a skill will not be as valued as it used to be today.
Correct.
But my biggest worry is that if these platforms start thinking for us,
Hmm.
then it's very easy to give into it and let it do all the work, right? So all
Hmm.
your research, synthesis, thinking, decision making can be
Hmm.
outsourced to a Gen AI platform. That is my biggest worry, because then you are not using your brain uh,
Hmm.
optimally,
Hmm.
and then what happens?
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. Same worry here. In
Mhm.
fact, writing is also part of your cognitive ability,
Yeah,
to think by writing, to research by
exactly.
writing, right?
Yeah.
And I think we will have to wait to see what happens. So, where can people connect with you, Anshul? What is the best way to connect with you and maybe follow your work?
Jaydeep, I think best way is LinkedIn. So I'm there, and
Okay.
yeah,
Do you
that's
do
the
you
best.
regularly write on LinkedIn? I think I
N-
haven't seen of your writing for a while. Maybe
Not,
I'm not
yeah,
actively
not
tracking.
as often as I would
Yeah,
like to.
yeah.
Um, it gets kind of deprioritized in your day to day, but I'm trying to make a more mindful effort to be regular on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And I look forward to that. Awesome, Anshul. I think this has been a fabulous journey of little over an hour. And we touched upon, I think, a plethora of points, starting from where B2B marketing is today and what are the top agenda of CMO, to what your current role is and how you see product marketing shaping up. From there, we spoke about branding, we spoke about ABM, I think we spoke about on AI and Martech, and then we also spoke about career. So it has been all along a kind of light bulb moment in many places for me. But thank you so much, Anshul, for your time, and really value you coming to the show once again.
Thank you for having me, Jaydeep. And this is such a fantastic conversation. And same, right? So, light bulb moments for me as well. Sometimes it's good to just sit back and reflect on things that you're doing, and kind of analyze why you're doing what you're doing. So, you helped me do that. So, thank you.
Great. All right. So I hope to catch up with you soon, maybe offline. But once again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.